Hello, fantasy friends. I'm the Raging Redhead Cam Stewart from HotRoster today. And week 13 is nearly upon us, ladies and gents. I've told you already just how important this week is. And most of you are likely only a few days away from the end of your fantasy regular season, meaning playoff time is just around the corner. So to help you out, I'm here with my final position preview of the week, and today I'm focusing on a few wide receivers you should start and sit. Is Michael Thomas the #1 guy in New Orleans or what? Because it's sure starting to look that way. Nothing against Brandon Cooks, but this shouldn't come as a surprise. The rookie from Ohio State is everything you want from a true X or Y receiver. Thomas has the physical tools to be that prototypical big threat wideout. Last week, in a tough matchup, Thomas caught 9 of 10 targets for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns, leading to a 22-point day in fantasy. Thomas is now the Saints' leader in receiving yards, catches, and scores. His 14 broken tackles are a team high and 4th best of any receiver. It's that ability to make plays after the catch that makes this guy so dangerous, on top of his sure hands and his 35-inch vertical leap to boot. This week, the Saints are once again back at the Superdome to face the Lions, which should only mean bigger things for Thomas. The Lions have allowed 5 touchdown catches to wideouts on the road this season, while the Saints averaged 34 points at home. This guy is the real deal. I'd start Thomas if you have him, and make sure to pick on him on any HotRoster cards this week. One of the biggest surprises of Week 12 had to be the Chicago Bears, and the fact that they actually had a passing game with Matt Barkley. The former USC Trojan shocked the fantasy world by completing 28 of 56 passes for 316 yards, 3 TDs, and 2 picks. And the recipient of all this production might have not been expected, Marquise Wilson of all people. Wilson notched career highs in receptions and yards against the Titans in Week 12 when he nabbed 8 of 11 targets for 125 yards and a score. Now, I know some of you out there thinking, hey, this is a one-time occurrence. That's not going to happen again with this guy, but that's where you might be wrong. The Bears are at home to the Niners this weekend, and if you thought the Titans secondary was a mess, wait till you watch what San Francisco has to offer. San Fran's pass D has given up a league-high 20 touchdowns to wideouts this season and 5 scores over their last 2. They've also had 6 different receivers tally double-digit fantasy points against them in the month. And there's been at least one every week of 2016, except for when the Niners played the Rams way back in Week 1. So if there was going to be one guy on the Bears to follow that trend, it's got to be Wilson. Don't be a fool. If you have the space to start or flex this guy, just do it. And I'll be picking on him on HotRoster given the right matchup. Another pleasant surprise in Week 12 had to be the continued success of Falcons receiver Taylor Gabriel. What's not to love about this kid? Despite another day seeing limited targets, Gabriel made the most of it. He caught 4 of 5 targets for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. That gives the former Browns cast-off 271 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. Now, I understand the concern and skepticism. Hey, my buddy Garion isn't even convinced, but I think Gabriel can produce again this week. The Falcons are in Hotlanta this Sunday for a date with the Chefs, which should mean plenty of opportunity for Gabriel to go off. Kansas City has 2 notable cornerbacks, Marcus Peters, who is a Pro Bowler, and then there's Phillip Gaines, who is, well, quite literally the opposite of a Pro Bowler. Expectation is Peters will be asked to shut down Julio Jones, which should leave Gaines to cover Gabriel. In a similar matchup this past weekend, Gaines was picked apart by Trevor Siemian and Emmanuel Sanders for 162 yards and a score. This week, Gaines faces an upgrade in Matt Ryan and a player in Gabriel, who is comparable in terms of speed and size to Sanders. I think Gabriel sees his biggest target share of 2016, and with those additional opportunities, I think he's going to go off in Week 13. Make sure you start this guy or flex him if you have him, and I'd be looking to bet on Gabriel given the right matchup on HotRoster. Speaking of a player who Marcus Peters just finished shutting down, Demaryius Thomas and the Broncos are off to Jacksonville for a weekend to face the Jags. And look, I'm not saying you necessarily sit Thomas if you have him, but consider this. First, Thomas's quarterback Trevor Siemian, he suffered a left foot sprain in Week 12, and he was spotted walking in a boot. If he can't go, Paxton Lynch would get the start, and that's not good news, especially when you consider the Jags have only allowed 1 200-yard passer over their last 4 games. Second, Thomas will likely be covered by Jalen Ramsey, and the rookie has already shut down some of the best wideouts in the NFL. He limited Hilton to only 3 catches on 11 yards and Amari Cooper to 1 reception for 4 yards. And through the first 9 weeks, he only allowed 1 score against him. That just doesn't bode well for Thomas. Thirdly, it's worth highlighting that last week when facing Very similar circumstances, Simeon looked in Sanders' direction often because he had the weaker matchup of Gaines over Peters. So for those reasons, I know it may be sounding crazy, but I'd be looking to bench Thomas if you can, and I'll definitely pick against him on HotRoster. Last week we saw the resurgence of Washington's Deshaun Jackson. The Boomer Bust fantasy wideout went off against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, racking up 118 yards and a touchdown on just 4 catches. My concern for the deep threat this week is a matchup with the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona's only surrendered 9 touchdowns to wide receivers all season. That's only 3 shy of the NFL's best 6 set by the Broncos pass D. Moreover, only 4 of those 9 touchdown passes have come against the Cards at home. Arizona is coming off a performance where they shut down Atlanta's big play threat in the passing game, Julio Jones. I think Kirk Cousins will throw a lot of short passes, meaning you might expect Jamison Crowder or Pierre Garçon to have decent days, but not Jackson. Keep him on the pine this week, and I'm betting against him on HotRoster. My final sit for Week 13 has to be Sterling Shepard of the New York Football Giants. There's no doubting the kid has major talent. Before going without a target against the Browns in Week 12, Shepard had scored a touchdown in 3 consecutive games. My concern is the uphill battle that both the Giants and Shepard's going to be facing in Pittsburgh this weekend. The Steelers are tied with the Denver Broncos, having allowed only 6 touchdowns to wideouts all season long. And only 5 wideouts have scored double-digit fantasy totals against the Steel Curtain in 2016. It's worth highlighting that in spite of Shepard's ability to find pay dirt, he hasn't topped 50 yards receiving since way back in Week 3. He won't break that trend at Heinz Field. I'd sit Shepard and bet against this guy on HotRoster big time. Well, that's it for today, friends. Make sure you join us tomorrow when I look into some of the featured matchups on the HotRoster card for Week 13. And for those of you who don't know what HotRoster is, go to HotRoster.com, check it out, download the app, give it a try. It's like no other fantasy game you've ever played. And then for help winning the game, check out HotRoster today with me and my buddy Gary and Thorne every weekday at 4:30 Eastern, only on the Fantasy Sports Network. For HotRoster now, I'm Cam Stewart, and I'll see you on the virtual gridiron.